What's going on, cat people? Harrison here with two cats, and I have a huge video for you today. I'm going to be covering the history of hardcore in Tower Defense Simulator, and the reason I'm going over this is so that you can understand why I haven't made a video about hardcore mode, even though it updated 6 weeks ago. But before I get started, why don't you go ahead and smash that like button if you like kitty cats. Now, let's turn back the hands of time and go back to the beginnings of hardcore mode. Back when it was originally released with the hardcore beta update on August 28th, 2020. That very next day, I published my first video of me beating hardcore mode on the Highlands map. We did use a strat to do this, but it was literally so simple I could just post screenshots of it on the screen. Oh man, I miss those days. So because of this fact, now the question is, was hardcore too easy when it was released? And I'd say yeah, due to the fact that we were able to beat it on the first day with a very simple strat, most likely on our first try. And in my opinion, beating hardcore should require that you follow a strategy. It should not be like a regular game where you just go in and place down whatever towers you want and beat it. It's supposed to be a challenge. It needs to be a challenge. And it just wasn't a challenge in the beginning. So the reality is, it was too easy and needed to be buffed. I mean, look at this screenshot. The placement prices for the towers hadn't even been changed. Even the upgrade prices were the same as a normal game. So I definitely think that the TDS devs needed to make it harder. And now enters onto the scene the humble child. About 2 months after I made my first how to beat hardcore video, another TDS YouTuber named Humble Child beat it on the same map as a duo. And of course, he just had to name his video Below Natural Buff Hardcore Mode Now. Welp, guess what happened next? This video came out 3 days before the hardcore update officially dropped on October 28th, and below buffed hardcore mode. So you can thank Humble for that. If you can find him, he kinda disappeared 5 months ago and hasn't been seen since. Just to clarify, the hardcore update was not the Halloween update. The hardcore update, also known as the overhaul update, was on October 28th, but the Halloween update released on October 31st. So there was a few days between the two, and they're definitely different updates. I just wanted to make sure you knew that. So after the hardcore update, the hardcore game mode actually got really tough. In fact, if I remember correctly, it might have been unbeatable. I think I tried it a few times and then just moved on to making different content because it was too hard. But here you can see in a video Humble released a few days after the Halloween update, he's comparing the hardcore stats during the hardcore beta with the hardcore stats after it was fully released. Now he says that during the beta period there was a 50% upgrade cost, but I don't remember that. I even went back and looked at some of my old footage, and it looks like everything has the same placement costs and upgrade costs as they do in the regular game mode, which is part of what made the hardcore beta so easy. So I don't know what he's talking about here. If you were playing TDS back then, drop me a comment to let me know if you remember upgrade prices being more expensive during the hardcore beta period, because I don't. But for sure, after hardcore was fully released, things did cost an extra 50% to upgrade. I remember that, and you only had 600 starting cash with a 6 farm limit. Well, it didn't take very long for the community to freak out about how hard it was, and for Below to nerf it again, which at that point is when Humble made the video you're looking at now, in which he also included the new stats after the release nerf, so we're going to compare those. Now this is when things get a little confusing because there's been so many changes to the hardcore game mode, but basically after the hardcore update release, this was the state of hardcore. You can now place 8 farms, the upgrade buff was reduced from costing 50% more money to 30%, and you now started with 700 cash instead of 600. And you can see from this screenshot at the time, along with the tower upgrades costing more, the placement prices were supposed to go up as well. But they didn't, and they wouldn't until the Frost event update released, but I'll get to that later. Now, a little later in his video, Humble also points out that after the official hardcore release, the game mode was insanely difficult, but after the nerf, it was easy if you followed a strat. Actually, I want to stop here real quick and mention that one of the things that originally made hardcore so easy was the Highlands map itself. That's what everybody beat it on. Well, this is one of the things that Below removed in an attempt to make the game mode harder. So after that, pretty much every successful strat strategy has used the wrecked battlefield map. Alright, now to get back on track here, Humble Child beats Hardcore on wrecked battlefield on November 2nd, 2020, and of course, he says it's too easy, it needs to be buffed. Remember, this is when upgrades costed 30% more. Then, on November 24th, he releases another video called Hardcore Buffed Again, impossible now, in which he very scientifically compares the changes the Hardcore game mode has gone through, and at this point, the farm limit is still 8, but the upgrade price buff has been increased from 30% back to the original 50%. And this is where your boy Harry comes back into the picture with his now world famous video covering how to beat Hardcore mode using the Pogger strategy. I released that video on December 5th, 2020, or just 11 days after Humble's video covering all of the Hardcore mode changes. And then my video went on to become insanely popular to the point where it's still the 3rd most viewed video on my channel. That video was so successful because it showed people how to beat Hardcore, and it gave them the strategy, so they all stopped complaining, and the TDS devs were finally happy with the state of the game mode and were able to stop changing it. So I actually made this little joke on my video. We did in fact beat the Hardcore game mode in Tower Defense Simulator on December 3rd, 2020. It is possible and really not that difficult. Please below, don't make it harder just because I said that. It wasn't really that easy. I was only joking. But seriously, it wasn't that bad. But only because we had an amazing strategy guide, which I'm going to be showing you here. I had to say this because now you know that every single time Humble beat it, he said, OMG, this is so easy, below buff Hardcore, and then it would get buffed. So I had to be careful. I didn't want to be that guy. But in all seriousness, the Hardcore game mode at that point was actually in a really good place. Because yeah, it was beatable, but every single person had to be following the strategy to do that. You weren't going to beat it with randoms, and you weren't going to beat it with random towers. You had to bring specific towers into the game and use them at specific times. And I think this is the reason Hardcore went unchanged for 5 months. Now it was finally in a state that the devs wanted it to be in, with only one more change to be made. And that brings me up to the final change the Tower Defense Simulator developers wanted to make to the Hardcore game mode, increasing the placement prices of the towers. Now this might sound like a small change, but it ended up having a drastic impact on the game. At this point, you can no longer use the Pogger strategy. In fact, the only strategies I've seen pop up since the devs made that change 5 weeks ago are the 2 from Egg Ripted. So if you don't know, a fellow TDS YouTuber that's an egg dressed up as a watermelon has made the only working strategies that I know of to beat Hardcore mode at the time of the making of this video. I'm gonna be making a separate video to cover those strats soon, but for now, the main thing I want to say about them is they are not sustainable strategies, because they both rely on the Toxic Gunner and giving the Toxic Gunner hidden detection from the Ace Pilot's hacker ability. If you don't do that, you're gonna die to the Shadow bosses on Wave 25, which happened to me a lot. The catch here is the Toxic Gunner only works because its slowing ability is permanent right now, which is not supposed to be. That's a bug. It's not supposed to be permanent. So this strategy is going to be completely useless when that bug gets fixed. And that's why this is the first video I've made about Hardcore since the winter update released. There's no way to beat it without the Toxic Gunner, and that just is not right. It shouldn't be that way. You should not need an event tower to beat Hardcore. You should need to follow a strategy, and it should be difficult, but it should be beatable without any special towers. If you want to make it easier with the accelerator, okay, that's fine, but you can still beat it using turrets instead. That's how it should work. So I don't understand why this placement price increase change was even needed, because even when you could use the Pogger strat, it's not like everybody and their mother was beating it. It was still pretty difficult. It required teamwork, and it required the right towers, and you couldn't just treat it like a normal game. You had to take it seriously, and you had to be sure you had an entire hour free just to beat it one time. That's how it was, and I think it was working well that way. But now we need to look at what it's been changed into. It's been changed into what seems to be the final form the devs wanted it to be from way back 10 months ago when it was originally released. So now we, as fans of the game, have to ask ourselves, is this what Hardcore is supposed to be? Is it supposed to be an impossible game mode that can't be beat? Do the devs want it to be a frustrating frustrating gaming experience? Because that's what this new placement price increase turns it into. Is it beatable right now? Yeah, technically it is with the Toxic Gunner, but is it fun? No, absolutely not. And again, remember, once the Toxic Gunner gets fixed, it isn't gonna be fun or beatable. Is this really what the TDS devs want hardcore mode to be? I don't think it is. I think it's supposed to be a challenge and an alternative to the regular game mode, but the way it is right now, it really isn't a challenge, it's just a pain. Because without the bug Toxic Gunner, hardcore would not even be beatable right now, because you can't get enough money to place the towers you need to stop the shadow bosses on wave 25. So you have to slow them down with the Toxic Gunner so the ace pilots can do a bunch of damage to them. Whereas before, you could get some golden minigunners down with the commander's call to arms ability and they would kill them. And I think that's fine. If somebody has to have the golden minigunner to beat hardcore, that's okay, because you can get the golden mini at any time in the game. It's always available. It's not an event tower. Yeah, you're gonna have to grind for it, and hey, that's even better because it gives people an attainable goal to go after, which makes the game more fun, because now they're on a mission to grind for those golden skins. But I think that the TDS developers really made the wrong choice here by increasing the placement costs of the towers. It totally changes the game, and hopefully they change it back. Which is actually my main recommendation for how to make hardcore great again. Make the placement costs the normal tower costs, keep the upgrade prices increased by 50%, and if you really want to change something else, then maybe change the placement prices by like 10 or 20% so they're only slightly more expensive. But making the placement prices 50% higher really destroys hardcore's beatability. And yes, I did just make that word up. And here's another thing I think people tend to overlook when they talk about what makes hardcore difficult. The hardcore specific enemies are really challenging. The balloons, the lead bosses, the mega slows, the fallen rushers, all of those. Because hardcore isn't just more difficult because of the tower price changes, the enemies also require very specific towers to be used to counter them, which makes it a tougher game mode. So there are plenty of aspects of the hardcore game mode that make it tough to beat without placement prices needing to be upgraded by 50%. So please, below, if you see this, either change the placement prices back to their regular placement prices or only increase them by 20% to see how that goes. You've already shown that you're willing to adjust the game mode in response to community feedback. So at this point, I think it's just wrong to keep hardcore in this unsustainable state any longer, especially considering the fact that there are more people playing this game on a regular basis than I've ever seen. So let me know what you guys think about this video down in the comments below. No pun intended. Do you think hardcore should stay the way it is? It's fine the way it is? Or do you agree with me that it's all jacked up right now? Also, go ahead and let me know about any other changes you think they could make to the game mode to better balance it out. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to smash that like button with your forehead, hit the subscribe button with your big toe, and turn on notifications however you can so you don't miss any of my amazing upcoming content. And I will catch you guys on the flip side. Take care, be safe, and never forget what I always say. Peace!